Haidong! In this video, we're going to talk about uniform etiquette. When you hear the word etiquette, it might bring back some childhood, trauma, about like sitting up straight and all that fun stuff. But etiquette is actually something that's going to be really important for not just you as a martial artist, but also for us as martial artists and a martial art in general. As with everyday interactions, it's also going to be true, within a dojang, right? So like instructors looking at students, students looking at each other, students obviously looking up at the instructor. It's also going to be true between schools, right? So if you have like an inter-school meeting or tournament or something like that, or international, right? So if there is a giant, training seminar or something like that, this is going to be one of those things that people are going to pay attention to, because it does tell a lot about who you are and what you value as a martial artist. So there is going to be a difference between arrogance, right, and then versus something like just understanding like self-worth and all that fun stuff in the way that you present yourself. So you will notice I'm not ever going to mention anything about having like snazzy duds or like the newest uniform, newest kagum, all that fun stuff. This is only about how you present yourself in terms of, for now we're just going to talk about the uniform just because it's something a little more concrete that we can tackle. And there's a lot of nitpicky things that can show a lot about you. I'm going to save the belt for last because that's something that is probably one of the most telling in terms of like if I'm looking at someone and how they wear their uniform. That's going to be one of the most important. So let's knock out a few of the smaller things just so you're aware of small details that you may not have known about. So working top down. So first of all, in general, make sure you at least hang your uniform. I prefer to actually fold my uniform, so I actually have it completely flat out and fold it in such a way that it maintains its general shape. So don't just squash it into a duffel bag and hope that's still good the next day. It's not, right? So first of all, that's not good for, again, the shape of the uniform, but also it's going to be the smell, right? So this is something that shows, like, first of all, your own self-worth, but also how much you're willing to, like, what you're willing to do for your peers, right? So for example, whenever we go to tournaments, it is mandatory that you wash absolutely everything, but also make sure everything is crisp, right? So when we're sparring something, we don't want the opponent to be remembering you not for your amazing center cut to the face or that amazing uppercut to the rib, but like, man, that guy really smelled. You don't want that, right? So not only is it showing your own self-worth, like I deserve to be in, not super dirty uniform. It also shows respect to your martial art, right? Because like, all right, so like I take the time to sweat and all that kind of stuff, but I'm also not willing to make it have it deteriorate physically. And it also shows that you're willing to do something for your peers. So first and foremost, this sounds kind of straightforward, but make sure you wash your uniform, especially the 2 nights or so before you're going to actually meet, at the very least, people outside your dojang, but ideally, every once in a while, making sure that it's clean. The previous recommendation is a little bit more straightforward, like that's probably something you thought of. Now here's something a little bit different. So again, working our way down, this guy, right? And also the one that's in here, but that's hidden. So in general, you want the stringy bit and the knotty bit, right? So the ears, if you were, and the string to be of the same length. And you also ideally want it horizontal. Now I will admit I'm taking this from some of my instruction from my kendo instructor back in the day. But this also, so first of all, the reason for this geometry is that's less likely for it to come loose, right? So versus this, there's something about that lets it come loose. So try your best to make sure that's horizontal and to the best of your ability. And now I'm still fiddling with it because I'm now over-conscious of it. But you want to make sure they're about equal in length here. So again, the loops as well as the tails, you want them to be about the same and about horizontal. So moving slightly down, so notice that there should be a little bit of an overlap between the two pieces in your front, and it should obviously come, again, across your navel and at least going down this way. Ideally, it's not going to open up this way, and if you know that's potentially going to happen, just because either your body shape or something like that, make sure you're wearing something underneath it, just as courtesy to other people. It could be a tank top. For us, you can probably notice it's going to be actually the unit, like the pants, right? So you might notice the pants underneath. But in general, you want that to be slightly crossed over. And also, the ideal is that this is all one straight line across, as opposed to like this flare kind of thing. So just be aware of that, because that is a small thing that people are going to notice, but it's not going to be as big, but something that, as anyone who just wants to look their best, something to keep a look at. The next piece is obviously going to be our pants, right? So you might notice I have a little bit more of a solid crease in mine. If you also look at some of the higher ups in the Federation as well, so I'm thinking about Grandmaster Kim. He has immaculate lines in his pants, right? So he clearly like irons it, pleats it, and it looks really, really, snazzy and good. So I would recommend it. It's a whole process, but if you don't, still you want to make sure that's nicely, again, folded, just like what we were doing with our uniform. Make sure that if you can, try to maintain the pleats, just because, first of all, it looks better. It also shows that you take the time to look after your uniform, because otherwise they just look like eventually just saggy pants, right? Which is not the ideal that we're looking for. Now there are going to be lots of other really, really small things I'm sure that I missed, but this is a really brief overview, so a few things that you can think about before we talk about the belt. So now that we're here, let's talk about this belt. So one of the biggest things that is going to be noticeable is the equal length of both ends. So I know this might be a little bit of an issue for at least the newer belts, so I think the Federation switched to a more synthetic belt material as opposed to a cotton material. So at least for me, I know that it, even though it starts off fine in the beginning of class, somehow it shifts so it's a little bit lopsided, right? So if you know your belt misbehaves that way, every once in a while kind of like check a mirror. If you do need it, so if there is no mirror and you need to check yourself, don't be in front of a student, just be like, right? So find the opportune moment, face away from the flags, right? So always face away from the flags, and also ideally away from the head instructor. So for example, my flags are right there. I'm pretending that you're my instructor, so I'm just going to be turning this way, so if I need to check, and if I need to do something, making sure that I'm facing away, again, away from the flags, away from really any higher up eyes, as well as ideally also your students. If you need to, you can also go into another room if you have that ability. That's something, again, that's showing, again, respect to the dojang, respect to your instructor. Also a minor thing, making sure if you have your name on your belt, that's on your right side. And if you have rank, so again, that's going to be your stripes, that's going to be on your left side. And ideally, both of them are facing outward. This is actually something that I noticed in a lot of masters, is they do this kind of thing, where like the white is kind of showing front. You don't want that, right? So ideally, there's this nice kind of graceful falling down motion, where the gold is facing more outward, as opposed to like this awkward tuck-in. So that's again a little bit more, slightly more on the aesthetic side, but also shows like I'm not trying to like hide my name, hide my rank, or anything like that. Like, this is who I am. If you need to identify me, which is the reason why we have names on our belt, right? Otherwise, it's just an ego trip. One of the last things I'm going to leave you with is, how do you treat your belt once it's off of you, right? So again, remember the belt is supposed to be the instantiation of all of your hard work, right? You really tried for it, you really respect yourself for it. Don't have it hit the ground. So one of the biggest things, and this is going to be true not just for Gumdo, but for martial arts in general, don't ever let your belt hit the floor unintentionally or drag it, right? Now, if you fold it, put it on the floor with respect, that's absolutely fine, but don't go around, dragging your belt or around your neck or anything like that, right? So what I'm going to show you is pretty much like how I would take it off as well as put it back on, because we Gumdosa have really long belts. It gets complicated, right? So it's really hard sometimes for it to not hit the floor, but this is something that I'm going to recommend. So for now, right, so I assume most of us probably know how to put on the belt. I'm going to do that in a little bit, and that'll be like the last little tidbit. Right, so if we're here, again, just like loosen the belt. In general, you want to find like where that middle piece is, and as you that come off, slide that up, so you're here. So you're already holding it at the halfway point. What I like to do is make sure, again, the two ends are even, slide it up, And so I have my name on the outside, half, fold in half again, and here we are. Now I know some people like to put like knots or something like that in their belt, but I prefer this, right? So if you have your belt like so, when you're transporting it, ideally you're tucking it, right? Like not quite underneath this way, but tucking it, showing that you're showing respect. Obviously, so don't do this. I feel like my belt's going to be mad that I'm going to be demonstrating this, but don't do any of these guys, right? So first of all, don't just be like, here, don't let it drag on the floor, especially if it's not even folded. Don't do this, right? It just shows all sorts of it just doesn't show respect to, again, your belt, which represents yourself, which represents the martial art, which represents your school, your instructor, all that fun stuff. Again, this is again the instantiation of all your hard work and your respect. So treat it like so. So here, tuck it. Again, if you need to put it down, treat it almost like the sword, right? So with both hands, come to a kneel, put it down, come back up. Now you might be asking, it's a really long belt. I try, it just doesn't work. So this is how I put it on. So I hold it, I got the loop, right? I let one flap come out. I'm going to bring everything else behind me. Just bring that first bit across, so this is where my name is, right? Tuck. This is really weird doing this in front of camera, so wrap it around. At this point, you might be like, yeah, that's going to hit the floor. So if you need to, you can raise your leg a little bit. I'd rather raise my leg and not have it hit the floor than let it hit the floor. So at this point, you can be a little bit quick. So you're going to grab, come back around, this way, right? Ideally, you don't need to raise your leg, but now you have this. You can pull this guy out. Now you might know based on your own belt the proportions that you need. I think for me, I need my name to be a little bit further out than the starting of the World Haidong Gumdo. So cross, left over right, tuck down underneath both, right? At this point, I like to also check my uniform, make sure it's pretty square. Tighten it. Now right over left, bring that through. At this point, before I actually squeeze it tight, I want to make sure there's a nice curve a little bit here, check it, make sure it's good, and if it's not, you can redo it, or you can adjust it best you can, and you're good. At this point, again, ideally I'm not in front of a camera, but I'm like away from the flags. I check my uniform one more time, make sure you check the back as well, make sure your tail is down, and once you feel like you're presentable, you can turn around and face the dojang, face your instructor, and all that fun stuff. So the biggest thing that I would like as the takeaway is your belt, right? So obviously, this kind of thing, like, yeah, that looks nice, right? Yeah, I don't smell. Yeah, like my uniform might be a little bit old, but I've taken care of it. Pleats and all fun stuff. But the belt is really where people kind of look, right? Just because that is your source of, respect and all fun stuff. So just be careful about how that comes off when you move around in the world. So drills, this might be a little bit of a weird one for drills, but let's take a look, right? So try it, right? So try making sure you have like the knot in the right spot, right? You can tug between them to make sure it's horizontal. Always make sure that you're even, right? Try to see if you can have pleats, learn how to like iron those pleats out, but be very careful because I ironed these once and they've maintained themselves, but fortunately I did it correctly the first time. So make sure you do it correctly the first time, otherwise it might be really hard to come out. But the biggest thing above all the others right now is how you treat your belt, right? So if you're one of those, draggy persons, right? So you just drag your uniform or drag your belt. If you're one of these guys, if you're one of those spaghetti monsters, right? So you just like crumple your belt up and shove it into your duffel bag or something like that. It might be a good time to change your ways. Again, first of all, if you do any of that, it's going to lose its general appearance. But yeah, so with all of that, make sure you stay safe, stay humble, keep training, and try to look good. Haidong!